These weren't done so well last year, so I want you to think a little bit more about them because they're very important parts of when you get into, if you want to do year 12, these sorts of testing and validation sort of stuff is actually quite important. And it starts on page 30. Now you can do a dozen of them. I don't expect a dozen, I expect maybe 3 or 4. So we've got range checking, existence checking, data type, restricted data, validation alert. They're all the things that you should have in your notes about data checking, validating data. So range. And here's an example. The months column must be between 1 and 12. So for your checking, you would say I'm checking the months column is between 1 and 12. Or actually, 12, 1, 2 and 3 I should say. Because my final data set was only 12, 1, 2 and 3. If you use more data, you have to check. Alright, so that's the range checking. And how I would do that is I would simply put my data into Excel, raw data, and I would highlight all of the columns, put a filter on them, and say, is the month between 1 and 12? And all of that column, you can see there, only has 1, 2, 3, and 12. So that's how I would actually do it. So this is what I'm testing for, and I would do it by highlighting, well you don't have to go through the steps, but you would say, put a filter on month, and then check all entries, because this here brings up every entry in that column. So it's an easy way to do it. So that's an example of range checking. Existence checking, same idea. I would use the same thing. Existence. I would use the same thing. I'd choose another column. I would check every temperature has an entry, because existence means the data exists. So I would check max temperature, are there any blanks? And as you go down there, you can see there are no blanks, because it comes out with a separate box down the bottom to say blanks. So I would check, and I only chose max temp because it was different. That's the only reason I chose max temp. Check max temp, no blanks. Using a filter. You have to say how you've checked it. And if you say using a filter, that's fine. I'll take that. If you say you scroll down it with your eye, which is a manual version of validity checking, that's fine as well. As long as you say how you actually did it. And likewise for data type checking, we went over a little thing a while back about this must be a year. You can do something to figure that out. I'm not going to give you every single thing. And restricted data entry. And I went over this briefly with Aidan earlier. When this data is put together, we copied and pasted out of PDF and whacked it in Excel. If the data was rolling forward at the Department of Meteorology, this month must be between 1, 2, 3, and 12. So you can put a restricted data type, like we had a little drop-down box that had a list of data in it, and it had to be a certain value. We did that in class a while back. That's how you would do restricted data entry. And the textbook has a copy of it on page 31 on how to do restricted data entry, but that's how you would do it. You would simply say this cell has to be chosen from a list, and the list comes up in a drop-down box, and the drop-down box is 1, 2, 3, or 12. That way you know that the months are correct. And that's an example of restricted data entry. Moving forward, I hope your batteries don't run flat. So we've done identify data validation. Now testing. Identify a set of test data to test validation procedures, formulas, functions, and the graphic representation. Sounds worse than it is, but on page 35, you just have to come up with a testing table. Oop, gone past. And you can see there the testing plan. And it's got lots of different things on it. And you need to make a note of all of these things. Note for each. So for 5, testing validation procedures, formulas and functions. Formulas and functions will be a testing table. And you would have that page 35. And my testing table was an average formula. So that there is an average formula, and if I quickly scroll out feature tested, this is the table, and it would be 10-year average. And then I would have test sample data, and it would be D2 to D11 average. And if you wanted to put the formula in there, you can. Make sure the formula's correct though. I put C. Oh crap. C2 to C11. D2 to D11 average. You write the full word though, don't shortcut it like I have. Then you would expect the result and you would calculate it manually on a calculator. You would go 36.7 plus 38.3 plus 42 on calculator, and provided you don't do any key punching errors on calculator, you would put the result, and then you've got actual, the final column, and that is 38.87. And if they're the same, tick. If they're not the same, cross, and you go back and check your formula. That's a manual. That's an electronic function testing. And then you've got the other key things that it's got there, which are a little bit more hard to sort of get your head around. So formulas and functions is relatively easy. Graphical representation. If I've got a graph, is the graph showing the data I want it to show? Have I pointed it to the right cell? So if I've got a chart over here, you need to say, no, well, I could put a trend line on it. Oh, I've done it already. That is a trend line option. Yeah, there you go. Helps to actually know what I've done. So you would make sure that the graph data points towards the raw data by simply finding the range of the chart. So on the chart there, if you've got select data type, you can see series December, raw data, blah, 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 blah. So you would make sure it's pointed to the right data. It's not that the data exists. That's validation testing. Alright? That's validation checking. Testing is if the data is correct for what you're showing, not if it exists or anything like that. So validating is done when you're setting up the solution. Testing is done once the solution is finished. Two differences there, and they sometimes are a little bit hard to distinguish between. What else have we got? We got completedness. Is all the data there? Reliability. Where did we get the data from? Data came from the Department of Meteorology, so it's fairly reliable. Presentation, accessibility, timeliness, relevance. The quick sentence on the easy ones, timeliness. We don't want to stop the data at 1950. That's not timely. Relevance. We don't want the data to be the temperature of Kosciuszko National Park when he lives in Dubbo. So you would say the data is relevant because it's the nearest testing station to his house. The data is timely because it's the most recent temperature recordings. So the functionality is a little bit tricky because is the data usable? Well, it's just a picture. It's not like a macro where he's got to be able to click on it and do some sort of manipulation. Don't have to worry too much about that. If you left out functionality, I wouldn't worry about it. Presentation. Does it look pretty? Is it easy to read? Can a colourblind person read it? You would say yes or no. Yes, it is because. So all of these questions are, yes, it's timely because. Yes, because. And you would have a quick sentence explanation. Usability. Yes, because it shows the data trend line over however many years for the months that Oliver wants. You don't worry about 6 because 6 is kind of 5 and 4 put together. And 7, 8 and 9 will all sort of be answered as you go through these. Use spreadware, software, apply appropriate formats and conventions, test the data, which is that part there, and record the results in a test plan, which is part of that one there. So these things are steps that should be included as you work through the questions. So it seems like it's a bit of a double up, but this is explaining what you should happen up here. So that's kind of what you should be looking at, kind of how you go about things. And the final thing you need to do, it doesn't really say come up with a judgment actually. I've sort of put you on the wrong track before. I misled you. You don't have to create, you have to give the solution to Oliver and he can make the decision on it. So you just give the information to Oliver and say this information suits Oliver's needs because of this and that and this and that, and then he can go off and he can figure out whether he wants to build a swimming pool or not. Not that he's going. Right, end of lecture. Go back to your work. Thank you.